Good afternoon and welcome back, and hope you've had a fantastic day, enjoyed all the seminars and engaging with the Tech Village and the refreshments and the food and everything else that's been here today for you. Just a reminder to you that we have a drinks reception, as we say, later on. Just follow the crowds is the easiest way, I always say, but we do have that, so feel free to join us after today's conference. And if you've really enjoyed it, which we know you have, we will be having another conference here at etc. venues. LGfL's next conference will be on Friday the 30th of June 2023. So do get that in your diary. Do get the request to get out of school for that day. Okay, so folks, we still continue and we've got lots to get through and we've got some fantastic speakers. So no time to go home yet. And you certainly won't want to. Because joining us up on the stage now, I introduce to you Louise Salmon. Louise, come on up. Who's going to be talking to us about supporting schools together to get the most from their digital ecosystem. So, everybody, please give a round of applause and a welcome to Louise. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. I've met many of you across last night and today, so I want to say thank you for being very welcoming. I'm fairly new to Primary Goal. I joined as the Chief Exec in September, taking over from Louise Campton here. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the Primary Goal journey and then what it is we do for you and your schools. Button. Next, please. Super. So Louise founded Primary Goal off of the back of her son being on the autistic spectrum and realised that there was a real need for devices to help him in school. And she went to the school and they said, we don't really know what to do with the device in the classroom. So Louise worked in further education at the time, like myself, and she went home and she made sure that he was able to progress at home with the device that she had. From there, Primary Goal was found because she was absolutely hell-bent on there being somebody to support people in education to ensure that the learners could get the best out of their experience in school, whether that be primary, secondary, further education or universities. So a little bit about myself. I started off in the corporate sector and then when I had children, like many mums, moved into education. And it was when I was actually volunteering as a teaching assistant in my son's class that I realised that so much time was wasted through the lack of digital capability in that classroom. My son's now 16, so that was about 12-ish years ago. So from there, what I did was I decided to qualify and I moved into further education. And from that point there, I was absolutely hell-bent on training people in education to go on and work in education to improve the outcomes for children. And I did that for a number of years. I then moved over into the apprenticeship sector. And it was there in the apprenticeship sector that I realised the vast volume of money that floats around unused. And if it isn't used, it goes into the treasury. And it drives me mad. So I went on, and what happened was I went in to become the Director of Teaching, Learning and Quality and Digital at Basingstoke College of Technology. So some of you may recognise me from the EdTech Demonstrator Programme. You may recognise me from my Head of Digital Learning, which was Scott Hayden. And I was sort of floated around in the background doing my role. So Louise, at the end of the conference last year, was really unwell and she actually had a stroke at the end of the conference. So for those of you that haven't heard from Louise over that period of time and you know her, please do go and catch up with her. And that was something that she wanted me to share with you today. So Louise approached me and asked me if I would come along and help her with Primary Goal, taking the Digital Champion programme and the other programmes that they were running to new heights. So what we have here is we have an apprenticeship training programme for anybody working in education. And what we do is we utilise the apprenticeship levy, so £13,000 of apprenticeship levy to upskill staff through a CPD process. So this process here is for anybody that's passionate about progress, anybody that's forward thinking. You may have staff or yourselves may have an underutilised skill set, and it can literally be for anybody. From principals, chief execs, heads of department, heads of faculty, teaching assistants, cover supervisors, business administrators, you name it, they can go on it. And what we do is we're agnostic, so it doesn't matter whether you are Microsoft, it doesn't matter whether you are Google, it doesn't matter whether you use Apple, it doesn't matter whether you use your phones, it doesn't actually matter whether you're still using textbooks, but you want to move over. That's the absolute beauty about this programme. So I'm going to introduce you to a lady called Claire, who's currently on our programme.
For me, for the Digital Champions Programme, I'm looking to learn what is required for me to be a digital strategic lead. So I'm looking at from a governance point of view, I'm looking at it from a financial budget point of view, I'm looking at it from a security point of view, really just understanding the industry and how tech is changing all the time. And the big buzzword I loved today was about sustainability. You know, really, what tech are we going to bring into our schools that is sustainable?
So Claire very nicely leads me onto the programme. So we've broken it down into 5 chunks, 5 sectors. So we look at digital strategy, planning and vision, and that could be at any level. That could be at MAT level, that could be at individual school level, that could be at year group level, classroom level, you name it, you can take a look at it. We look at leadership and governance because it's really important for every single layer to understand the governance of your organisations, and it covers off GDPR, data security, and all of these topics that we've heard about today. We also look at leadership and auditing the current state. So we take a look at what the state is of each individual classroom, as well as the school. And this doesn't mean going away and chucking everything in the bin and starting again. This could literally mean that you've got 5 devices in a cupboard that aren't working. But if those 5 devices were working, those 10 children wouldn't have to buddy up. And it's looking at all of those intricacies. We look at the device refresh, and we'll then look at the financial planning and budgeting, and everybody takes part in all of this. We have multiple partners that work with us. We work with Microsoft, Google, UK Head of Education for Apple has just approached me. They are coming to work with us. We partner with LGfL. We basically partner with everybody that works from a place of integrity and wants to work for the common good, and that is really important to us. So the programme utilises £13,000 of the apprenticeship levy. The reason I'm repeating that again is because last year £770 million of unused apprenticeship levy just went into the Treasury. So think of it like a savings pot. It's a tax that comes out of every single school and business across the year. And once it hits the 24-month mark, if you haven't spent that savings pot, lovely Mr. Treasury or Mrs. Treasury, take it. And it does not get fed back into education. I think we can all pretty much guarantee that. In the last 2 years, £2.2 billion went back into the Treasury of unused apprenticeship levy. So our partners, like Lloyds Banking, they will fund and support with through levy transfer. So will Amazon, so will Microsoft, so will the combined authorities. And they all come to us, including the Co-op recently has offered us £16.2 million. We have a ridiculous amount of money that we can tap into, and it's really important that you hear me, that you find out the information, and then potentially you explore this with us. So we have Primary Goal on Demand that we've set up since September. This is a bespoke programme. Sorry, this is a bespoke, I saw the 5 minutes, it's distracting me. This is a bespoke piece for our learners. So basically, if your staff are in the classroom and they're struggling, they can go onto the instant chat and they'll get a response. So if your IT team are really pressed and tight, they can actually just jump on and say, I can't get my device to connect to the whiteboard. And there'll be somebody on the other side, because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to teach in the furthest classroom, in the furthest block, when they stripped the phones out and I couldn't get hold of anybody through the computers because the computers weren't working. So you can jump on your phone, you can do all of that, and it's really important that we support I feel like they're my learners, these learners, your staff. They can block in with one-to-one consultations for 20 minutes, and then there's other training content which sits in Primary Goal on Demand, and that's from everybody. So whether it's Microsoft, Apple, Google, Acer, you name it, it's in there. With our recent cohort, some of you may have seen the Portsmouth, the Digital City, and Acer stepped forward and they've offered us £35,000 match funding for each of our apprentices that apply, and it's accepted. So we have all of that coming our way. all of our learners through the, enter their evidence through the BUD platform, and we obviously have to safeguard our learners just like everybody here does. And these are all of our other training programmes. So yes, we have the Digital Champion for Education, we have it for administration, and we also have it for commercial. We also have Level 3 ICT, and I know there's some schools here that have got learners on our ICT programme, that have learners on our Digital Champion programme, and we've launched cyber. And the reason I've launched cyber is because my husband's a cyber specialist in the armed forces, and it was when I started to really understand the issues with cyber to the UK in the current climate, and this, when I say current climate, I realised probably about 2 years ago how bad it is. There is a cyber apprenticeship there. We have 2 cyber specialists at Primary Goal, so therefore we are now launching the cyber apprenticeship. So all of the information that you've heard today about the cyber attacks, that is true, that is real, that is genuinely happening. And I just want to say about the Skynet, LGfL Skynet, I was part of a programme that supported putting in Starlink in for the Ukraine, and it was absolutely exponential in their communication. So do take that seriously, because that is coming through thick and fast. We also have the one-day cyber. So if you've got people that are interested in just dipping their toe in, if you've got somebody with that underutilised skill set, they're slightly intrigued, then there is the one-day cyber programme, which is just a very small nominal fee. It's kept that way intentionally for the schools, but you can dip your toe in and you can take a look. There's some of our education partners, and some of you are here today. And that's a little bit of a heat map of where we work across England. And there's some of our technology partners. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. It's amazing. Really good to hear that and see what what's available to us all. Okay, folks, next up this afternoon, we have another fantastic speaker. We've got John Tate, who's the Deputy CEO and Director of School Improvement at the Arete Learning Trust. I always try to get that right for John. And John's going to talk to us this afternoon about, it's not about the content, it's about the conditions. So folks, let's give a nice warm LGfL welcome to John Tate.
Thank you, Dave. Much appreciated. Yeah, Dave made the point about getting the name of the trust right. Whenever I speak at places, especially when I come down south and speak, which isn't that often, a lot of people pronounce it the Arete, or they think it's the Geordie Hello Academy. They, Arete, mate, how are you doing? But it's the Arete Learning Trust. So well done for pronouncing that, Dave. Top marks. I want to talk to you a little bit about the conditions and not just the content. So I want to start with something a bit about me, and I know you've heard from quite a few speakers today, and lots of people have talked a little bit about them to start with. And I think that's really important, because ultimately we're in a human relationship business, and it's that kind of human connection. It's always interesting to know, well, who am I speaking, or who am I listening to, what's their kind of background. So just some kind of quirky things about me, I suppose. I was a C-grade kid at school, so I didn't get any A's. I was that kind of typical C-grade kid, probably a bit of a lazy boy, and you can probably think back to, or now the students in your classrooms and stuff who might have been me. I often talk to the kids about the fact that I used to work in the most famous restaurant in the world. And I often just leave it there and kind of move on, and some of the kids are like, oh, wow, that really means that you can dream of anything and you can work anywhere. I'm like, yeah. And then some of them kind of said, sir, is that like one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants, or like the Ivy in London, or that kind of stuff? And I then suddenly after then said, well, no, it wasn't actually. So does anybody know what the most famous restaurant in the world is? Mackie D's, yeah. And lots of us may have served our time, or what type of time that is, in establishments like that, in terms of, in between university years and that kind of stuff. But certainly it was character building for me. I've written 5 books, and that's amazing, the fact that I was a C-grade student at school. And I wouldn't have believed anybody if I was sat in an English lesson when I was 14 or 15 and they said, you're one day going to write for the same publishing house as one of the most successful authors on this earth, which is J.K. Rowling. And I tell kids all the time that I don't write for the publishing house that she writes for the publishing house that John Tate writes for. And that's quite cool, having 5 books published by Bloomsbury and kind of all that. I used to coach American football for Great Britain. learned a lot about strategy and attention to detail, preparation, and understanding how to kind of ultimately, I suppose, outthink other people and that kind of strategy of winning. But most importantly, what I want to mention today, hence the icon on the right-hand side of the screen, is I was a free school meal child at school. Now, I know, statistically probably, about a quarter of you in this room may have been a free school meal child yourself at school. And I was talking to some teachers yesterday about this, and actually what's really interesting is that until someone pointed it out to me about 10 years into my career, and they were applying for the kind of pupil premium champion at one of our schools, and they were really passionate because they were a pupil premium child themselves. I was like, I was one of those. And I then started reflecting on, am I doing enough, and am I being the champion that I needed when I was at school? Okay? So I'm going to talk to you about that today, and about how digital technology in part can help that, and how we can kind of put, really kind of drive that gap down, because it's really important to me. Not that I lived in poverty, and not that I lived in kind of squalor, but ultimately I wasn't one of the kids that had the new trainers. I wasn't the kid that went on foreign holidays. It was all those things that I didn't kind of have that some of my other peers had. But I'll talk to you about that, why that's really important as I get towards the end of my talk. What I will do as well, I'll call my shots right now. I have not much text on my slides. I'll let you look at it. I won't read it to you, because as teachers we sometimes we put things on the board, we read it to people, and you have an inner voice in your head reading it back to you while you're trying to read it, and it's slightly out of sync with my voice, and it's awful. It's like playing two music tracks at the same time, slightly apart, or the same music track, should I say. So I'll put some stuff up. I'll give you 2 or 3 seconds of silent time. That's your cue to read what's on the board, and then I'll talk to you about it. First one, though, is, you may have worked this out, given the kind of the front-loaded talk about disadvantage and pupil premium. This is the money that's gone into pupil premium in this country since it was first brought in 2011, and year by year it's increased to an outrageous amount of money that's £2.6 billion in this current academic year. But unfortunately, the reason why there's a line on the bottom is that gap is still that big. There hasn't really been anything different. We haven't been able to actually close that gap, and actually since COVID we know it's actually got wider, and I've heard a lot of speakers today talk about that and about the poverty and the disadvantage and how that's actually caused more issues, and you know that, we know that, we live in that. Okay, that's not a surprise to us. But what is a surprise when you look at the figures is actually the amount of money every single year invested, and we still can't really change that stubborn gap. Okay, so that's how I want to kind of start with as we go in. And this is something that's, I said, really important to me, and I think it should be important to every single person in the room. That actually, if we don't do this, and if this isn't our kind of MO and our kind of real driving force, then what are we really in it for? We've got to give that opportunity for students to be able to actually get out of this cycle, like I've been able to do, like a lot of you have been able to do potentially. And actually, how can we then do that for other people? Because if it is about postcoding, if it is about actually already putting people in boxes, then we're not in a, not a great place to be. And this is interesting. Just have a think about this. So, in our classrooms, in our schools, yes, we have pupil premium strategies. Yes, we have whole school intervention for certain students. Yes, we do things slightly different, slightly. But ultimately, as you are sat now, the kids in your classrooms will get a very, very, very similar version of your lesson. They don't have an audio playing over the top slightly different. They don't have a visually enhanced one, slightly, or they don't, and they might do with the robot sat next to me soon in terms of hearing about that this morning. But actually, they get a very, very similar diet in terms of the actual content from the teacher. And yes, we do other things on top of that, I get that. But the actual kind of instruction and a lot of it is very, very similar. But we know from the last graphic that this happens. So when they leave your classroom and they go home, if they are the most disadvantaged students, we know, and there might be some schools in here that might be able to put that up and say, oh, actually, we've totally got rid of our disadvantage gap. Well, brilliant, great. Let's hear how we've done that. But generally across the country and across the world, we know that this gap still exists. That those students get a similar diet in school, they go home, and they achieve very differently. Which brings me back to that kind of graphic to start with. Of all the money that's going into the schools, it might need to be going somewhere different. Okay? So what happens when that student goes home, or those students go home, might be, I say might be, where we want to focus a bit more of our attention, because actually we've got really great instruction in class, we've got all these things going on, etc., but that money, over time, hasn't made any difference. Let's start thinking about it differently. And about thinking about it differently, it brings me, I was thinking about this morning when I was getting ready at the hotel, thinking of those two quotes that stick in my mind. If we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. Going back to that graphic of the pupil premium funding. And the other quote, it's what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And actually what we've done over those 10, 11 years is we've tried and we've thrown enormous amounts of money at stuff, but actually that gap still exists. So in this room and in this world, in this, these networks, we've got to start thinking about this differently. We've got to start employing different strategies for our students, for our families, not just our students in our classrooms, but for our families to try and do this. And we've heard lots of speakers talk about this morning about how we can use technology in different ways and we can be innovative in those ways. And I'm going to show you one way that uses technology, but it can also be very, very analog at the same time. And I listened to Mark Anderson speak a few minutes ago, and I've heard him talk all the time, for years and years about don't just use technology because it's shiny. There's got to be a reason. It's got to add something. All right? We're not just doing it because it's digitally able to do it. Lots of things we can still do that are analog that are better. So it's choosing the right innovative platform at the right time to solve the right issue. Now, this is the key. So, I don't think I've met a parent that has said to me, I do not want to help my child. I've been teaching for 20 odd years. No one's ever been that blatant. I might have thought that after the different stuff they've said to me, but they haven't been that upfront and said, I do not want to help. Okay? So if we start this from the premise that all of our parents that serve our schools want to help, I run into so many conversations, either in my work, in my networks, with friends, family, and even I was speaking at a conference yesterday, even the people in the room that I was speaking to who were educators and teachers but were parents as well, were still saying to me, I wish I knew that, or I wish I'd known that. All right? So what happens is that lots of parents think that it's about the content, and they get a little bit intimidated sometimes because they don't know Shakespeare, or they don't know physics, or they say, well, I'm no good at maths, so I can't help at maths. And actually what I'm hoping to trying to dispel is that it's not about the content. It's about the strategies and it's about the conditions in which that happens, rather than actually thinking it's all about the subject content. So let me give you an example. I do a lot of talks on the science of learning. And one of the things that's come through really, really strong in schools of all the things of the science of learning, and what I mean by that, if you're not familiar with that term, it's retrieval practice, spacing, interleaving, cognitive load, dual coding, learning versus performance, metacognition, all those types of things. The thing that's kind of landed the best, I suppose, is retrieval practice. And wherever you go into schools now, we generally seem to have got the fact that retrieval practice is really important, and it's better than restudying. And the reason it's better than restudying, I'll explain in a second, okay, is because it's that constant retrieval, rather than just rereading something and your eyes skimming over it, and you mistake familiarity with deep learning. And I fell into that teacher crime, so many times until it was pointed out to me. I used to spend 60, 70, 80% of the year teaching new content, leave 20% of the year at the end to revisit old content, thinking that was a good idea, and the kids are just nodding along going, yeah, I know this, yeah, and they fall into this yeah mentality. So retrieval practice is a lot better. However, how many of your parents would absolutely know that, and how many of them would be practicing it at home, in their homes, on a night, on a weekend, with their children, to reinforce learning? And that's an interesting reflection, and to start thinking, well, okay, we know this as teachers, and it's fairly straightforward, and we think we know it, and it's kind of happening in our classrooms, but is it happening at home? Because if it's not, going back to that slide before, your students go home, and they achieve very differently. So, what I always use as a great yardstick for this, because I like to give really concrete examples, especially to parents. Let's make it really simple. Let's give people concrete examples that they can understand. And they can kind of get on board with it and go, yeah, I'm in now, I understand it, I believe it, and if I believe it, I'll then enact it. So, as a show of hands, and I did this yesterday at the Beast Conference with Dave yesterday, and I always judge the room and see kind of the age range, and is this going to kind of work? And without being disrespectful, I think this will work based on the general age range of the room. So, just raise your hand for me if you can remember your first ever landline telephone number. Just raise your hand for me. Okay, there's a lot of hands in the air. Hands down, thank you. Okay, now I just want you to think about, first of all, how long ago it was since you used that number. How long ago, right? So I imagine if it's your first landline telephone number, and judged on the audience that I'm looking at, it's probably at least 20 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago for some people, okay? And we remember that number right now as a concrete memory. Possibly, depending on where you live, an 11-digit or a fairly random 11-digit number if you had the dialing code. Although we might not have had the one when we first learnt it. I know I didn't when I learnt it. So now thinking, right, well, from a retrieval practice point of view, why is that? How on earth have I learnt that number for 30 years, concrete, that I can just bang? I can put it out right now, I can write it down, and I haven't used it for ages. And again, thinking about how we then use this language with parents so they can understand how retrieval practice works. I would normally take some kind of answers and stuff like this, but it's quite difficult with the size of the room, so I'll kind of throw some things out to you. First of all, it might be that you had to actually put your hand in and move the telephone round. All right? And it's interesting, I said to you before, I judge the audience of the room. I sometimes talk to trainee teachers and they go, what's a landline? And you go, all right, okay, I'll leave that one and I'll talk about song lyrics instead. But so you might have had to physically move that number around. So there was something physical that happened. You had to do something, okay? Secondly, a lot of people say to me, well, if I was out on a night out and I had to ring my mum for a lift home, I needed to know my mum's number to put it in the telephone box. You didn't just hold the name down, you had to physically type it in. So it meant something to you. And thirdly, and most importantly, I think, certainly in my house, I was taught and brought up to answer the phone by saying my phone number. Hello, 01325 34123. And I was like, why do we do that? Like, the person's rang you and they know who they're ringing, do you know what I mean? And you just tell, hi, it's me. And they go, oh, good. So let's pull that apart a little bit, especially for parents. So when we explain it to them, right? Why is it? Well, it was an unannounced, I didn't sit there revising my number, an unannounced retrieval, low stakes. Right? I didn't get smacked if I got it wrong, otherwise I wouldn't be answering the phone. It was unannounced, nobody said, someone's going to ring the phone in 10 minutes, get ready. And it was constant, so I was constantly doing it. So that became then a real concrete memory in my mind that I can now remember 35, 40 years later. So when we start to put it in those terms for parents, people go, oh, I get it now. And then we can then start to say to parents, right, well, here's one thing you can do. When you sit down, my wife tells me off for this all the time, because what I want to say is, when you sit down at the dinner table with your kids, my wife keeps saying, you can't keep saying that, John, because there's so many people that don't have that dinner table. And I have to keep checking myself and going, okay, right, when you kind of sit down or stand or speak to your children about what the day they've had at home, at school, if you say to them, what did you do today? That's what a lot of people say. What did you do today? You get a crap answer. I did maths, science, English. You're getting nothing out of it. They get nothing out of it. Change one word in there and tell parents to change one word. What did you learn today? Bang. We're straight into a retrieval question. We're straight into actually a bit of learning by stealth. They don't know what's happening. They tell you what they've been learning today. Bingo. They retrieve it. You actually know what they're doing. Everyone wins. So we start to get these messages across to parents. We can then start to potentially break some of these barriers. And Mark Anderson also referenced this about the work that Dave Brailsford had done with the GB cycling team in terms of the aggregation of marginal gains that I know a lot of you will know about because it's kind of transcended sport and into education. And what that means is, if you're not that familiar with it, is it's the adding up of all the small things that we can't find massive silver bullets anymore. They don't exist. But we add up the 10 little things and it makes something big. And what's interesting is that in sport, we generally find now the biggest performance gains don't come from actually the performance itself. They come from a way in the background. So what happened in the GB cycling team is they actually didn't really look at the kind of how they would cycle better. They looked at the suits. They looked at the bike itself. They even made sure that they took the mattresses of the cyclists to every single hotel, so every night they were sleeping and having the same night's sleep. Now we know this, if you've stayed over last night, all right, or you stay over regularly somewhere, you generally don't get, or you might say, actually I get a class night's sleep because I can starfish in the bed and I'm not next to my wife or my husband. But that premise of like that little detail, and it had nothing to do with the cycling. Same as this, it's not about the content. Schools, we fall into the trap of, let's bring them in over Easter, let's do more sessions, let's do more of the same. Why don't we start thinking about other things? So, what are those other things? Let me give you a few now. So if you're a parent in the room right now, here's some things to take away, all right? Right away, especially as I spoke to some parents yesterday who were parents of teenagers going through GCSEs, A-levels, SATs, etc., etc. So things like actually listening to music. Lots of kids tell us, and I know that this is generally for most people, it works for most, not everyone. Most kids will say, I work better when listening to music. Generally, that's rubbish. Because actually, if you're listening to music that you know the lyrics of, and you're nodding along and you're almost humming along, you are multitasking. Your brain is doing something else when it should be focused on the task at hand. Okay? So as parents, we then need to say, that's rubbish. And also, even if because they just like to do it. They can't sit in an exam hall and listen to their music. So we need to practice in the same conditions in which we perform in. Okay? Other things like if you've got a son or a daughter who likes to revise and study on their bed, right? A bed is for relaxing. If you sit on your bed or you sit and you slouch, you're already in a relaxing mindset. So it's very difficult to get into a work mindset. That's why lots of university students like to study in the university library, the campus library, before they go home. Too many distractions otherwise. If you've got a mobile phone, I've put mine down there to stop the distractions. I read an amazing book by Johann Hari called Stolen Focus. I've been tweeting about it and put it on LinkedIn forever. It's amazing. The amount of distractions that we get that take us out of our state of flow, right, is absolutely criminal. If you've got a son or a daughter and you say, oh, I think they're upstairs revising, and they're in their room, I would suggest not. Because actually, when we start adding these things up about the aggregation of marginal gains, and we go the opposite way, if they've got their phone next to them, and if you've got a teenager in your house, you only have to just look at the lock screen, how many times it flashes and lights up in a minute. Sometimes it's double figures. If that's happening, and they're on their bed, and they're listening to music, and they've got some distractions, and it's late at night, and they're rereading their notes and not doing any retrieval practice, no wonder. And especially if you've got a house 2 doors down that's not doing that and are following lots of other different ways, then there's your gap. That's the obvious part, all right? So we've got to make sure that we give this to parents and we can talk about how they can actually help. Because straight away, it then empowers them. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, because I struggle with it in my house. 18-year-old, well, he's at university now, but my 15-year-old daughter, she's going to be an amazing woman, but because she's got so much kind of independence and kind of, strength of character, I just don't need it as a 15-year-old girl. She's going to be amazing at some point, but right now she's testing me. And they call me the fun police. Oh, it's the fun police. And I'm like, I write about this, I speak about it, I'd love to be able to help my own bloody kids. And like, oh, here we go again, yeah. So I know it's difficult, I get it. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't just do it, we should just go, oh, well, it's too difficult, right? We need to do it. And it's also about doing it at the right time. If you are going to go home at night and go, I heard this man speak today, I'm taking your phone off you right now before you start this assignment, it's not going to go well. That's not the right time. You need to do it at the right time, maybe at the start of the year or the start of the week. Right, this is what we're going to do, and you sell the why, like you do in your normal organizations. Why are we going to do this? Well, the reason we're going to do it is because if you can learn more in less time, do you want to do that? Kids go, yeah, absolutely. Well, here's how we're going to do it. So we need to do this, and we need to give parents that parenting superpower. And what's interesting about this is everything I've said, it's not new. It's all out there. I've seen loads of nodding heads where you're all going, yeah, I know about mobile phone distractions. All right, I get what you said about lying on the bed. I get what you said about the music. All of that, and I've got so many more. But we've got to curate it for our parents. So it's like you say to someone, go on YouTube, it's on there somewhere. The knowledge is all out there, but we've got to make it accessible and engaging. And you've also got to think about what's the best way to do it. Is it in the written format? Is it in a digital format? And actually, the mediums and the format. So you might just say, well, we're going to use social media. But even drilling further into that, which social media? Are you going to use Instagram? Are you going to use Facebook? Are you going to use YouTube? Are you going to start using TikTok? What is it that's going to actually engage your parents with this? And in what style? What's the style? So I want to show you a 1.5-minute video, a project I've been working on outside of my day job really, on how to potentially do this in an engaging or hopefully engaging way that might actually land with parents. It's about mobile phone distractions. If you can play this for me, please. Thank you.
Mobile phone and app notifications are now part of our everyday modern life. However, they've become the killer of focus and attention, especially when trying to concentrate or study. Even if your child has their phone on silent, there's still a burning temptation to want to check it for any messages or notifications if it's within arm's reach. Think about how many times we do it ourselves when we pull our phone out of our pocket just to check if someone's messaged us. Therefore, switching it to silent or turning off notifications is simply not enough. If the phone is in the bedroom or the designated study space when your child is supposed to be studying, then you can guarantee that their focus and attention will be constantly interrupted just by the sheer presence of their phone. The solution is easy. Get rid of the mobile phone from the study space for the duration of the study, so your child can forget about it and get on with the task at hand. But when they're on a break, they can check their phone, catch up on all those important notifications, before handing their phone back to you to restart their study. Although they may be resistant to it, you need to take control and remove their mobile phone, the phone you're probably paying for anyway, in order to create the perfect study environment.
Okay, so a quick demonstration, and I've done a lot of these. I'm piloting a project at the moment that I'm wanting to kind of really get out there for free to parents around the world and want to partner with people to kind of make that possible. But I want to finish on two really powerful things, probably my two most powerful slides. I said to you right at the start that I'm a free school meal kid. I know lots of you in here will be. I absolutely believe that what has made me successful is the very thing that made me disadvantaged. Grit. Determination. Now, you listen to people on talk shows, you listen to really successful people, generally they've got a backstory. There's something that's happened to them that's made them grit their teeth and get on with it, and it's in there. You can't teach what's in there. You can teach the techniques and stuff, but actually, we need to let people know that the very, very thing that makes them disadvantaged is their X factor. That's the key. Sports, business people, and we hear about businesses that have been born out of, from trauma to triumph. Somebody dies in the family, it gets passed on to someone who's had the golden or the silver spoon, and what happens? Business fails, because they're not asked. They haven't got it in there. These kids have got it. I've got it, and I've got it from being disadvantaged. So, and here's the magic. If we can give the kids, the very, very kids in your school who've got that, who've got the X factor that you can't buy, you can't teach it, you can't give it to someone, if we can teach them though, the techniques, the preparations, the right way to learn, gee whiz, these kids are going to be unstoppable. It's like that football team that is the hardest working team that's also got the talent. Like, you ain't beating that team because you normally get one or the other. Suddenly when you get everything, and we've seen that in recent times with a team that I don't even want to mention, who have won leagues in the last 2 or 3 years, you've got the most work rate, you've got the quality. I'm telling you now, our kids, our disadvantaged kids, if we get them to use the right strategies and we help their parents, they can outperform in life their more advantaged and more affluent peers because of that X factor. But we've got to give it to parents, we've got to show them this, we've got to teach them it, and we've got to show them that they can all help, and it's not about the content, it's about the conditions. If we get that right, we've got magic, and we can all do it, and we can all then start to then change those things. One thing I'll say though, is I find it really difficult, is that because I've now escaped that cycle, I've got 2 kids of my own, that I'm thinking, they haven't got that. And I'm trying really hard to find how I bring that back to them, because I had it because I didn't have those things, and I've now been able to be successful enough to not give my kids the same kind of upbringing, and then and they're like, oh, do we have to go to America again this year, Dad? And I'm like, oh my God, like, what's happening here? So it's really difficult, but it's about being conscious of that as parents, being conscious of the system, knowing where we are, and knowing that actually that grit is really important. But if we can give the other things to them, then we're going to get there. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be around if you want to chat about anything later on. Thank you.
I've had the pleasure of listening to John for the last couple of days in presentations, and I have to say, take so much out of that, can't you? So I think there's something in that for all of us this afternoon. Thank you very much, John, and for travelling all the way from the North East to join us. Up now on the stage is Dr. Fiona Aubrey-Smith, who's the Director of One Life Learning. She's going to be talking to us about powering up pedagogy, the what, the how, and the why. So everybody, if we could give Fiona a nice warm welcome to the stage. Here she is.
Thank you so much, Dave. And wow, what a day it's been. It's been absolutely fantastic. A huge thank you, John and the LGfL team, for bringing us all together. There's a real sense of community here today. Now, this session is about powering up pedagogy. I need a clicking thing. There we go. It will be about powering up pedagogy in just a moment. No, have you got my slides at the back? Okay, take a 1-minute break while we just manage a little technical glitch. We'll be back shortly. Look familiar. Okay, we'll try again. Thank you for your patience. So, this session will be about powering up pedagogy. It's going to be a bit of a 20-minute masterclass in what that means for all of us and how we can all take action, why it makes such a huge difference to young people's lives. Now, in 2022, and you might well already be aware of this, the global spend on EdTech amounted to about $6.5 trillion worldwide. That's about 5% of the entire global education spend. That is massive, isn't it? And that spend, that education budget, should be making an equally massive difference to the lives of the young people that we are all here to support. So before I go any further, I just want to give a big shout out to all the technicians, the IT specialists, the digital champions, the EdTech pioneers in this room. Your hard work is the reason we're able to use that digital technology to improve the lives of students and educators. So a huge, huge thank you. And every day, colleagues in this room are upskilling teachers across our networks of schools in relation to technology and digital strategy. But how often have we invested back in you, upskilling you about pedagogy? Now, 2023 is the year that changes, and that's going to start right now. So, what am I doing wrong? This is fun. Oh, thank you. There we go. Now, every single one of us in this room works in education in some form or another. So every day, every action we take, we should be continually asking ourselves, how does what I'm doing now impact learning, right? And as Professor John Hattie says again and again, know thy impact. So thinking about impact, let's just have a look at some of the key post-pandemic EdTech research findings. Here's just 5. There's lots. Here's just 5. If you'd like a full academic literature review, and I'll happily give you a link at the end of the session. So first, there's a notable trend across EdTech research that teachers are consistently provoked to do something in relation to digital technology. Second, while leaders and teachers generally agree now that integrating digital technology into learning is necessary somehow, use in our classrooms and our schools still remains highly variable. Fourth, we're seeing a tangible shift, aren't we, from the novelty of getting the laptops out to teaching and learning using EdTech, which develops greater kinds of metacognition. And we know from the Education Endowment Foundation research that adds an additional 7 or 8 months to student attainment outcomes. We know that it can make a massive impact. And finally, that global studies show that teacher EdTech confidence has doubled since before the pandemic. Now, that confidence is specific to particular kinds of uses, and it doesn't necessarily yet translate into meaningful learning experiences for our young people all the time, but the confidence is growing. We've got the ingredients there. Now, the thing is, most of this is not new news to any of us. The friction in conversations about EdTech today is largely the result of the irony that actually we're still talking about the same things that we were talking about 10, 20, 30 years ago. As Hegel famously said, the only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. So what's going on here? Well, it's all about alignment. Academic, practitioner, and supplier research consistently tells us that digital technology makes an impact when it's underpinned by effective pedagogy. And you'll have heard that theme permeate the sessions today in the conversations around pedagogy. And much like these stones, it's about moving from an assortment of great ideas, good intentions, brilliant innovation, to cohesion, clarity, and a clear vision about what we're really trying to achieve for our young people in 2023. It's about precision and alignment in everything we do and say around technology. Now let's just briefly unpack what we actually mean by pedagogy. And I normally teach this as a full master's module, so this is like a 3-minute short version, right? Now the word pedagogy was historically an academic term, and it's now been joyfully embraced by the evidence-informed teaching impression. That is fantastic. It's leading to far more purposeful conversations about meaningful classroom practice. However, there is a problem. Pedagogy is often used still as a relatively generic term, and it's often used to refer to things like theories of pedagogy, pedagogical beliefs and stances, pedagogical intentions and strategies, pedagogical approaches and methods, politicised pedagogy, curriculum and assessment, pedagogical practices. And actually this point isn't necessarily specific to technology. It applies to all kinds of aspects of our classroom practice, but that's a conversation for another workshop. Anyway, this lack of clarity means that conversations in our EdTech space, when we use the word pedagogy, tend to be quite wide-ranging and tend to be absolutely immersed in assumptions. And the key one being an assumption that we all mean the same thing when we don't necessarily do that. That leads to a lack of precision when we're identifying what exactly we need to do as educators next to improve teaching and learning. So allow me just to take you through just 3 really important definitions that really highlight what we're referring to specific to EdTech now and why this matters, why this makes such a big impact on learning. First one is this. Pedagogical approaches, sometimes referred to as pedagogical methods. These are teaching strategies that we use in our classrooms. Retrieval practice, space learning, interleaving, cold calling, talk partners, all those kinds of things, including things wonderful John was mentioning earlier on. Now, this tends to be what practitioners refer to when using the word pedagogy. But please be aware that every pedagogical approach emerges from a particular theory of pedagogy. For example, retrieval practice stems from traditional pedagogies. Talk partners stems from social constructivism. Interleaving stems from individual constructionism. And collaboration stems from sociocultural theory. And that matters because each of us have individual pedagogical beliefs. Each of us individually have a set of values and beliefs about what we believe it means to be a learner and to learn, to be a teacher and to teach, how knowledge comes to exist and who is involved in that process, and what the role of schooling is in that bigger picture of education. And if we use pedagogical beliefs that align with or are built on our pedagogical beliefs, then those pedagogical approaches will be effective. But if they're not aligned, it's a bit like forgetting to put fuel in your car. The learning will slow down and eventually the engine stops working or falls apart. Now, two little interesting snapshots from the research in this space. The first is that pedagogical beliefs tend to determine which subject, phase, role or specialism we go into when we make choices about our employed roles. And second, that there will be a range of pedagogical belief systems coexisting in your school even when there is an agreed, adopted teaching learning strategy in place. And all of that makes for a really fascinating conversation if you're seeking consistency or if you're thinking about organisational-wide change, but that's a conversation for another day. So finally, pedagogical practices. In other words, everyday specific actions, such as making eye contact, asking an open question, identifying a misconception, modelling a task. Think of it like this. I've got a little bit of bake-off inspiration here. Your pedagogical beliefs are your decision to make a chocolate cake rather than a lemon tart. You value sweet over sour. It's not right or wrong, it's what you believe and what you value. Your pedagogical approaches would be the recipe that you choose, the how to make that particular lemon tart. Anyone can follow the same recipe, right? And you'll get something that looks roughly like a lemon tart. Some chefs will be more consistent or better than others. Mine would look terrible. But despite all of this, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone wants to eat that lemon tart. That goes back to what you value. And your pedagogical practices are your mixing technique, what brand of flour you use, how accurate you are with your measurements and your timings. You might not be aware that they're choices that you're making, but those details will affect learning in very subtle ways. So you can see there's quite a lot of scope for different interpretations when we talk about pedagogy in an EdTech context. We're all busy people. We all take out of a conversation what we assume was meant, and we apply it in a way that's meaningful for us. And that is really, really important to recognise when we think about EdTech. Effective pedagogy doesn't necessarily mean something is good or bad. It just means it's working as intended. And those intentions come out of our belief systems. So if we want to be effective when we use EdTech, we need to be forensically precise about what it is we actually want to achieve and why. Why we think that's the right thing to do for our colleagues, for our learners. All of us, every single one of us, are what Professor Neil Selwyn calls pedagogical gatekeepers. Through our roles and our influences, we are either opening up or closing off choices that can be made by learners and educators in the moment of learning. And our pedagogical beliefs define what pedagogical approaches and practices become possible for teachers and become possible for learners. And they're embedded in our very communications and interactions every single day. And we're often completely unaware that this is happening. For example, The location of wireless determines whether learners can access support materials or marked work between lessons, something that research shows makes a massive impact on the rate of progress. Or that pivoting lessons around online knowledge resource hubs infers that knowledge creation is always done by someone else in another room and never by the people we are here with. Remember, please, that every decision in a school is ultimately a pedagogical decision. I'm just going to demonstrate this with some practical examples. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, please. It's like group therapy. And just think about one classroom teacher from your own childhood. We all have someone who jumps into our mind, either because they had a profoundly positive effect on us or because they gave us some element of trauma. Now, think about what it was that that teacher did or did not do that made you feel that way. Now think about today. As a teacher or a professional working in education, do you do that thing? I bet you either replicate it if you think it was a good thing, or you completely react against it if you think it was a negative thing. Which means that the embedded pedagogical beliefs that you have were initiated before you even thought about becoming a teacher, before you even thought about working in education. And more importantly, the pedagogical beliefs that are embedded within your own practice, whether you're aware of them or not, are sowing the seeds of an understanding for your students in 2023. Your beliefs are setting trajectories. That's quite profound, isn't it? Let's look at some concrete digital technology examples. I'm going to take you on a little tour of 4 parallel classrooms, all learning about the same topic and all using digital technology to make collaboration possible in learning. They're real examples. I'm in schools every week. That's where these are drawn from. So in other words, 4 versions of the same lesson underpinned by 4 different pedagogical belief systems. And I want you to take no notice of what technology they're using. I want you just to focus on the role of the group in relation to each individual learner's learning, what collaboration looks like, and what the teacher was doing before, during, and after these activities. And see if you recognise your own teaching approaches or those used by colleagues. You might want to note down which one you most align with. But note there is not a right or wrong to this. It's all based on your values and beliefs. So here we go. In classroom 1, learners had been set a task to answer some questions about a particular topic. They were using online resources like film clips, interactive images, specific websites and apps they'd been given access to via Google Workspace, and there's slides from the teaching input. And they were finding out the answers to these knowledge-based questions and talking about them with each other. Each student then answered the given questions using an auto-marked Google form. Now, I think there were 3 versions of that form with varying difficulty, and learners were assigned different forms depending on which one the teacher felt was most relevant for them. And the learners who completed the quiz first were rewarded with extra time to research further information. And after that lesson, the teacher reviewed the marks and used the data to plan for the next lesson. That's classroom 1. Classroom 2, learners were working in groups of 4, defined by the teacher to ensure a gender and attainment mix. Each group had a Google Doc that had been sent to them as an assignment and with a number of sections in it. And the learner used the resources that were available in that Google Drive in order to find out specific information about the topic. And then they had to complete their section of the Google Doc, setting out their understanding. And at the end of the lesson, the teacher reviewed the Google Doc and used the insights in order to identify misconceptions and then plan for the next lesson. In classroom 3, learners are working in groups of 4 again based on attainment from the last lesson. Each group had a blank Jamboard that had been sent to them, and they accessed the resources available in that Google Drive and worked through those, adding Jamboard stickies for each key point that they found out. And each learner had a different coloured sticky. Learners then reviewed the stickies from their peers and posed challenging questions to them, such as, what if, or why did that happen? Extending that peer's thinking into their zone of proximal development. And in classroom 4, learners were working in groups of 4 again. Each group had access to that Google Drive, and they explored the resources as a group before discussing how the topic related to their lives today, both within and outside of school. They captured those ideas, with each learner writing up a particular part of the conversation. They reviewed those findings together, and they identified who else they might want to draw into that conversation to connect their learning with real-life communities of practice, or communities of purpose, as we might call them now. Now, each of those 4 examples illustrated a different theory of pedagogy, as you can see on screen now in the blue bold text. And if we had more time, we'd unpack what's actually going on there in detail. There's a link on screen to a book which details this extensively. But anyway, I'm not saying that any of these were right or wrong, or any of them were better than any others, but that each is underpinned by a different value system. And it's that value system that's actually teaching young people about learning, because it makes them believe different things about themselves and about the process of learning. Think back to that childhood teacher. It's their values that you remember. Consciously, we teach what we know. Unconsciously, we teach who we are. Now, for reasons of time, I'm just going to skip ahead over a couple of examples because I just want to focus on something very specific. I want to touch on this in our uses of tools. Professor John Hattie, you'll probably be familiar with his visible learning research, found that if teachers and leaders are able to choose tools that help them to become the teacher or leader they want to be, then both the tool and the person becomes more effective. And that leads us to greater collective efficacy, which we know trebles the impact on student achievement. Now, just the last couple of minutes. About 18 months ago, I started using this word pedtech to emphasise this point. Historically, we've talked about edtech, and we absolutely need to continue doing that. Technology gives us the what. EdTech gives us the how, the what that means in a teaching and learning context. They're important foundations that are absolutely vital for us to continue. But you will have noticed that when I shared examples today of using the technology, the quizzes, the device choices, the Jamboards, Google Workspace, all of that, I didn't actually talk about how the technology was being used. I was talking about why those features affected interactions between learners and learners, learners and teachers, learners and knowledge, learning and their communities. And that is why the word pedtech helps, because it reminds us to think about pedagogical beliefs first, about why we think particular approaches to using edtech are important. It's a bit like that famous grammar book, eats, shoots and leaves, or eats, shoots and leaves. The emphasis is subtle, but it's an important one. And in 2023, we need to pay more attention to pedagogy, because that's what builds sustainability into both edtech policy and practice and young people's lives and learning. That is why we are all here, isn't it? So my call to action to you today is this. What do you believe learning should mean in 2023? Be clear on this first, and then, and only then, look for the right technologies to support you. And when you're defining learning, what does that mean for our neurodiverse learners? For learners with special educational needs and disabilities? For learners who bring new forms of diversity, culture, language, creativity, identities and challenge into our classrooms? What does that mean for learners who are already high attainers and aspire for more? What does that mean for learners who are struggling or who are overwhelmed or traumatized? Because they all matter, don't they? So how are we going to support them using the brilliant tools we have at our fingertips? Now, thanks to John and the LGfL, there are amazing colleagues in this room right now that can make that happen for you and with you, that can make learning more responsive, so things like formative assessment, responsive and adaptive teaching, more autonomous, where students are able to access relevant support and resources that are right for them, more inclusive for all students, more sensitive to cognitive load, more creative, more interactive, all of these wonderful things. And through the EdTech Hubs, LGfL have given us a fantastic support system to give that support to you in a way that's meaningful for you and for the learners in your schools. And I strongly urge you to sign up and be part of this. And phenomenal teachers and leaders, many of whom are in the room with us today, have also shown incredible generosity in sharing examples of pedagogically led uses of digital technology in practice. And if you visit the PedTech portal, you'll find loads of short films that pair all this research that I've been inferring with practical, hands-on classroom activities. We've got Leo Academy Trust, Ribblesdale, High Furlong, Anson, Whitefield, many, many more. It's all free. It's a growing resource. It's there for you right now. So to close this session, I just want to state the obvious. The digital divide is no longer just about access to devices and connectivity. It's also now a direct reflection of the choices that all of us, every single one of us, make in our pedagogical gatekeeping, whether we realise it or not. And those choices are not just affecting our classrooms today, they're defining the very DNA of how the young people in our care see their learning and their lives ahead of them. And LGfL, this wonderful network of schools and partners and the phenomenal range of support available, is here to help you. So it's over to you. Let's do this together. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
That being switched now. Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. What another fantastic speech this afternoon. Very, very thought-provoking to all of us. Lots of takeaways there, and listen to that term PedTech. All these hubs that LGfL have put together. I think there's so much practice there that we can learn from. So really good to be able to share that back in our settings as well. So you may have met this gentleman before. I'm sure you see him regularly on social media. He's even brought his family here to be with him today. We have got Chris Dyson, who's the Deputy CEO at the Create Trust. And Chris is going to come up to the stage now and talk to us a bit around building a school on love, his former role as head teacher at Parklands Primary Elite. Everybody give him a nice warm welcome to the stage. Chris Dyson, welcome back to LGfL.
Testing, testing. Well, what a fantastic day, and I'm so honoured and I'm so proud that I've been given the honour of closing everything up today, probably because they knew I'd probably run over by an hour and everyone's got trains to catch and things. So, but before I start, I think we need to give all the LGfL staff a huge, massive round of applause. Not that long, I haven't got that long left. Because you don't get a lot for free nowadays. And, when you've got a free venue to come into, the best lunch on a conference anywhere in the country ever. Let's hear it for those caterers through there. And I've just been blown away from all the speakers that I've heard today, the inspirational stories from you guys just there that we learnt about last night. But I'm going to speak today about Parklands, a school built on love, because for 9 years, my entire life was built around this school. And I've got 25 minutes to try and summarise that 9 years, because in January, I made the brave move of moving to the Create Trust down in Birmingham, instead of inspiring 380 children, I've now got 3,800 children there, 300 staff, a new challenge, because I'd taken Parklands to this level. Now I wanted to go back and do, for disadvantaged children, an opportunity in Birmingham, where 2 of the schools are RI, one's inadequate, but one's a really, really solid good. And I'd like to go in there and sort of make a difference. So, but this, and it touches me that I'm here with John, because John saw bits and bobs of this speech around about 4 or 5 years ago. And the investment that LGfL put into Parklands was unprecedented, and it was all from the back of me coming in, having the luxury of speaking. But this today will be my very, very final time that I talk about Parklands, a school built on love, because I've now moved to pastures new, so I'm going to start putting together a new speech and things. So, in summary for those... Next slide. Oh, not that far yet. So we just want slide 3. Batches have been used well today. I was doing notes, see how many minutes I had per section, so I'll be whizzing from my notes, as it were. So, but the background of the school, when I took it over 9 years ago, was that it was one of the most deprived schools in the country and one of the most deprived estates in the country in a lovely place called Seacroft. It had 33% special needs. It had a whopping 150 exclusions in that particular year, 5 different head teachers, so nobody knew if they were coming or going. They didn't want me to get the job. Oh. But luckily enough for me, nobody else applied. So they had to take that gamble on me. But I went into that job because, you know, we set challenges every single day for children. And I thought, nobody wants that job. So if I go into it and it doesn't work out well, I can just go back to being a deputy or a classroom teacher and things. I was quite late coming into headship. In the sense that I was 44 when I came in, because I wanted to be the best classroom teacher, I wanted to be the best maths leader, I wanted to be the best deputy, learn in the trenches. So I went into so when I became head, I'll be able to move on and develop that sort of school. And the local authority had graded it inadequate, which I loved because I take positivity from anything. And they said, that's not good, Chris. I said, it is, because I get 20 days free support from you guys that I don't have to pay for. So you can help me out and things. The most popular game was Tig on the Roof, which, for you Southerners out there, it's like tag, but on a roof and things. And when I moved into school, they were so proud that they just opened up a new £15,000 padded cell. So it had an exclusion room where the 17, 18 naughtiest kids would be in there. Everyone wants to be in that room because they had one teaching assistant alongside them. When you're watching on CCTV, chairs were going back and forth. And then it got to about 2 o'clock, one were dragged out, put in the padded cell as a message to the others. Needless to say, that came out pretty much on the first week, working like a glove. So, up to 3 weeks ago, it's now 7 weeks ago, because I'm 7 weeks into this role, we were lucky enough that we only had 1 exclusion in the 9 years. No staff retention problems. I only had 4 staff that had actually left for promotion sort of reasons. We were TES National Award winners. And given the deprived nature of the school, you know, and like my great friend John, who was speaking earlier, I too had free school meals growing up. I had no dad at home. You know, I had to get, in good old 1970s school, I had to stand up in front of the old class and walk out to the front to go down to the warehouse to go and get my free school clothes. And that's the first time I ever had a pair of Levi's, which they said I'd grow into, and I did by the time I was 23 and things. So, but it was about believing. And I told these teachers, you know, these kids can achieve anything if we build a school on love, if we make it exciting, make them want to come in. You know, and given, as I said, the deprivation there, we actually hit the top 1% of schools in the country in maths, which I know we were talking with Al earlier about governorship and things. That caused me problems with my governors because they wanted to know why reading and writing were only in the top 5% and things. So during one maths moderation visit, I had the SATS police in there. And because I'd devised this thing called early bird maths that they do from reception through till year 6, 20 minutes every single day, 5 days a week, that's 100 minutes a week, 39 weeks a year, 3,900 minutes, divide that by 60, gives you 65 hours extra maths a year. And they watched the arithmetic paper, they knocked out this arithmetic paper in 14 minutes. I said, I think I'll collect the papers in now. And the inspector said, you won't touch the papers, they'll get the full allocated 30 minutes. And then when she said, I've got a meeting in Stockport at 1:30, I'll watch your reasoning paper. Well, the reason for that story is when those results came back, 1 child dropped a mark because of the impact of this early bird and this impact and this belief that children can achieve. And it came to a great end in 2017 when we were lucky enough to get an outstanding grade from Ofsted. Personally, I'd get rid of that grade because you're either good or you need some support and things. And an outstanding is literally a flick of a coin. Sometimes it comes down your favour, sometimes it doesn't. But it was my chair of governors there that I was so proud of because he'd been chair of governors for 33 years. Not just a governor, the chair. And my average staff age at the school when I took it over was about 27, 28. So he'd really seen this roller coaster of a ride. Everything built at Parklands was built on well-being. Well-being of teachers. And when I talk teachers, I'm talking TAs, office staff, learning mentors, cleaners, everybody. We're building loo days. Now, my lovely family came to collect my suitcase today for me. They'd heard this speech before, so this one went off again. But bringing my own daughter to one of the most deprived schools in the country was a big thumbs up for the community. If he's bringing his child here, he just wants them to achieve like we did. So I do Lou building days. One of the reasons I brought out Daisy to our school is because when she was in reception and she got the opportunity to play Upsy Daisy Angel, it was a bit heartbreaking because I said to my head teacher, can I go and see her because reception don't do a 7 o'clock performance? And my head looked at me and said, of course you can go, but who's going to have your class? So I missed out on her doing there. So I brought her to Parklands, where the quick ending is, by the time it came to year 6, she played Sharpay in High School Musical. Boom! That was the best thing I'd ever done in the school, putting on that. Likewise, a really sporting son, who I never got to see play any of his football. But again, positives and everything. I created a Sunday League football team for him to play in, and we ended up with 54 players at one point, running over 4 teams. So everything was to do with well-being. And everything obviously is to do with the well-being of the child, with well-being, not just a 1 week a year, you know, it's embedded through PHSE and other such things every week, but we always start every half term, actually. It ended up being with a well-being week. If you get children that are happy, then you get parents that are happy. And in deprived areas where domestic violence is quite high, if you've got parents going home on a Friday night buzzing like a fridge with their children, then it makes a huge impact on their weekends. And when the big thing I miss about Parklands is my fun day Friday best seats in the House Assembly, because that was what all the week built up to. And when you've got 120 parents that are in there watching this assembly, it touches your heart and things. I've got a little example of it in a bit. I brought in an unprecedented £500,000 last year from businesses, spread around 380 children. So I ended up with a situation where I could have 46 teaching assistants in 15 classes, 5 learning mentors, just to balance my books and things. But I know I'm very much in an exception there. And if I'd been given an hour and a half to speech, I would have gone through all that with you and things. So. And this is an experience. So as I said, I wanted, when I took over Parklands, these children to have the same opportunities as my own children do. Like John, I had nothing growing up, but I didn't miss it, because if you don't have it, you don't miss it. We had lots of love and things. But as my children now, when you get a knock on the door in Portugal, and it's Amazon delivering books for your daughter that she just ordered online, you're thinking, get in a swimming pool like your brother and things. But these children don't have opportunities like that. So I wanted to give them things that were totally different. So hopefully this will play when I press. I'm probably the only school in the country that gets a helicopter in every year and taken on helicopter rides. And again, quick show of hands, who's been on a helicopter? Okay, quite a few more than normal and things. So, but for these children, they experience something that not a lot of people do, and it makes them feel special and give you that extra bit in front. So, everything we think about for the child. Helicopter trips. When I took, it was essential for me for these children to have residentials. I never went abroad till I was 22. My holiday was a day in Cleethorpes, which again, you don't miss Mallorca if you've never been, but we loved and valued those holidays that we sort of had. My best ever experience of holiday was my first year 6 residential. Boom, it was outstanding. And I wanted all these children to experience this. Thus, I got funding for every year group, year 3, year 4, and year 4 twice, year 5 and year 6 to have a totally free sort of residential. Whilst in Whitby with the year 5s, there were this group of children rubbing sand between the toes. I said, what are you doing? They went, ooh, don't that feel funny? I said, what? And they said, sand between your toes. And it transpired that these children, these 50 kids that I took, only 3 of them have ever been to the beach. So I said, I'm not having that. Shut the school down. We'd shut it down every July. We go to Bridlington, okay, where every child from reception to year 6 has a right to eat an ice cream on a beach, splash in a sea, things that we take for granted and things. And it, as I said, it broke my heart that they weren't having these opportunities, and that was my drive for what I sort of did when I was there. One of the big things is also that first Christmas I'm walking around. Have you been to see Santa? You been to see Santa? I found about 8 kids that had seen Santa. Pulled me senior staff in that night. I said, we are opening Christmas Day this year. My staff said, nobody's going to work Christmas Day. And that's why you've got to listen, because nobody would work Christmas Day. But I always have a plan B. So we opened up Christmas Eve, where, you know, every child gets a present, you know, unprecedented, things that we take for granted. And Christmas just gone, 800 Christmas Day dinners, 800 presents. Northern Ballet spent 18 hours building the exact same replica stage that's in the Grand Theatre in Leeds, sent in an orchestra for the children to experience some capital culture and things. So, and this is a quick extract of what the Christmas sort of looked like.
Good evening from Look North. The real meaning of Christmas was on show today at a school in Leeds. Parklands Primary should have been closed, of course, but it opened its doors for an Eve of Christmas Eve party, all for the local community, and Harry was there.
Children queuing to get into school, and they can't wait to get in. Here you go. Welcome to Parklands Primary, an outstanding place in every way, thanks to its head teacher.
Well, it broke my heart 4 years ago when I first started this fantastic school, when it came to my attention that only a few of our families ever got the right to see Santa. And it's every child's right to see Santa at Christmas. So we just wanted to open up school to show how much we care and how much we love these children. Inside school hours, outside school hours, all the presents that we've got, all the food, everything's donated to give Parklands and Seacroft, the community, something really special and memorable at Christmas time.
A polar bear prowled the school. No one minded. Santa Claus was there too. All the staff worked for free, by the way, all for children like this.
Some of the staff come in and they've decorated all of this on Friday, and they come in to like give presents to all the children.
It's about like seeing people that you wouldn't usually see because it's the 2-week holiday for Christmas. We get to come in and see Santa, and we go down to the dining hall and get some food.
Parklands Primary is not just any old school. It's the life force of the community. It knows its work is not done, even if it's closed.
Seacroft smile. That normally brings in about £30,000 a year from businesses to support that things now, just because we went above and beyond. Now, holiday times are the most vulnerable time, and this is where I'll have to really whiz through now to catch up. But, you know, working with great partners, you know, has ensured that Christmas we can open every single holiday from half term right through to the big 6 weeks holiday. The school opens 3 days a week to make sure that there's hot food provided. My staff hated me. I know it's hard to believe. My staff hated me when it snowed, because as a year 6 teacher, you'd be thinking, come on, keep that snow coming, snow day tomorrow. But my staff know if it snows, we're opening, even if it's 11:30 in the morning, because we've got to get them kitchens open, because we've got to give them a warm food and things. You know, and it's every business that we bring in, we give them experience. And I've got a couple of examples to sort of show. But during lockdown 1, it was all about food. We emptied out every 100 minutes. God, I'll keep going then. So on lockdown, it was all about food, and we emptied out every Costa coffee. My parents had some kind of caffeine addiction after, some, you know, like we have today out there. We emptied out every single Burger King. The big scoop was McCain's, who sent me 35,000 meals to distribute on the hottest day of the year, but we did it. That's 19 tons of food, and we did that. And I got a random 20 grand that someone just rang up and passed me down the phone. And so it was absolutely essential. Lovely. Let's localise the sat just down here at the front. You know, on lockdown 2, it was about laptops and making sure that children had laptops. Because when good old Gavin, it's such a shame to see him not doing as very well at the moment, isn't it? But it had good old Gavin saying, everyone's got to do remote learning. Yeah, ow. You know, so we let's localise it, of course, LGfL. We managed to end up with around about 600 laptops and everything, and then the Wi-Fi dongles that we then needed, because when we had the laptops, they had no internet and things. So, just to finish off now, There's a couple of lovely little videos to show what Parklands is like, because sadly, I won't be there if you came and visited anymore. But it's all about getting children wanting to come to school, loving coming to school, because if they're in school, they're learning. And this is an example of how a fun day Friday, best seats in the House Assembly. So everyone's nice and happy, and then they'll all sit down at the end and get ready for the next part of the show. Funny enough, we ended up on Anton Deck's Saturday Night Takeaway, which was a real adventure for them. But it's not all fun. There's a work ethic, and this is how my world-famous times tables, and again, giving you deprivation of these children, when I tell you these are 5 years old, doing their times tables, it just shows what dreams can be made.
So we'll ask for
5 years old.
9 times 9. 81. Stage people. 1-0. Let's have 7 times 4. Let's have 7 times 3. Let's have 6 times 4. 24. Yeah. That's fantastic. Give me the first one. We've got 9 nines. Give a round of applause. Can we get your special certificates? Give a round of applause. We've got our champion. It's lovely. Hey, Claire, who gets a limited edition superstar certificate and a trophy. Give a round of applause. So now,
and then just to finish off today, I was lucky enough invited by the Shine Trust to do a speech with Gary Neville up in Manchester. And I did my speech with Gary, and I didn't know that, I'd know that Shine Trust had been filming for the previous 6 months. And it was the first time that they played this video, which sums up Seacroft, where it is, the low level academically, you know, from parents and things, and the need for us as educators to give these children belief and hope, because when you believe in the children, you believe in the teachers, and you believe in the teachers, this is everyone, anything can be possible. So this is my sort of final sort of swan song. Last time I'll see this on a stage.
I'm Riley and I'm 11 years old. I live in Seacroft, which is a part of Leeds, and I go to Parklands Primary School.
Seacroft itself's got a high proportion of unemployment, it's got high levels of crime. We are one of the most deprived primary schools in Leeds and in the country. Education standards in Seacroft up to 4 years ago was exceptionally low.
I didn't really enjoy school because I didn't get anything and I always had to ask someone to help me. It was really frustrating. I just felt like I didn't want to do it anymore.
I've had the pleasure of teaching Riley for 2 years now. I think that he was struggling because he just wasn't really interested. He was quite shy, so he didn't tend to put his hand up. He wouldn't like to put himself out there. So we were searching for an intervention to help, and we found Times Table Rockstars.
I came up with the idea of Rockstars about 9 years ago in my classroom because I had a group of 30 year 7s and they didn't know the times tables, and that was hindering their making progress in maths. When Shine came in, it gave me that opportunity to go beyond the perimeter of my school into many others.
Times Table rock stars can be used as a way of making children not afraid of maths, not dislike maths, actually see that maths can be fun. Every week we have a times table competition to become the overall class champion.
Times 7. Part 2. Just, okay, well done, give it a big round of applause, right?
They then compete in the Friday assembly.
Key stage 1, times tables champions out in front, please.
And the one winner becomes the overall times table champion.
12 times 6.
72.
72 minutes, guitar, a round of applause.
Didn't really like maths before Times Table Rockstars came. Now I'm really good at it. It just pushes people to do the best of their ability, and if you practice that much, it'll make you good at maths.
Maths attainment 4.5 years ago when I first started was rock bottom. Now we're fast forward 4.5 years and we're in the top 1% of schools in the country. And this all comes through by using times tables to create a love of maths, which then actually spreads across the entire curriculum.
I'm much happier at school because I can do stuff myself without asking anybody to help me. It just makes me feel like my confidence has grew.
I am so proud to be associated with Shine because we're on the same page, we share the same mission of having an impact and creating something that's going to make that difference.
Who wants to be a rock legend? Me!
Projects like Times Table Rockstars really work for children like Riley. His knowledge and love of maths now has helped him in other areas of the curriculum. He's helping other children with their times tables. He's really become a role model. I know that he's got the ability to do whatever it is that he wants to do, and I know that he'll succeed.
It has taken me 2 years, but now I'm a Times Table rock god.
So for the very final time, you know, thank you so much for listening to me today. It's still emotional when I sort of watch that, given the journey. You know, but who knows, in the next few years I might be invited back to talk about the impact that we've had on Create and the new trust and things. So that was my book that came out sort of last year, but thank you so much for being my very final audience on this. So travel back safely and big love sent to you all.
What do you say? Can everybody just stand up for a moment in the room? It's not often I do this, but wasn't that a very special moment? And I think I feel very privileged that this is the last time that Chris is going to talk about Parklands, and it's at an LGfL conference. So I think, what should we do? I think we should give him a round of applause, everybody in the room. What a fantastic... Don't you think? It's very rare, isn't it? When we've all been in education for a long time. It's very rare, and this is a very special man, and I can see it means so much to you. And you are a very special man for what you've delivered. You saw the impact on children. I don't know about everyone else, but I once wanted to cry. You can see I'm struggling now not to cry. So this man deserves, a fantastic send-off. We love you, Chris. Thank you for everything. You are brilliant. And I'm going to close the conference on that and say, thank you, Chris. Thank you for everything you've done. You are a wonderful man. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Let's go and enjoy a drink now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, tremendous, mate.
Same story.